from Democrats. You know, honestly, it's hard to identify one or two foreign policies that both Republicans and Democrats would agree with. You know, you could argue maybe U.S. policy toward Israel would be one example where there's pretty bipartisan support. But other than
Iran,
that, I can't really
is
think
another
of
one.
anything. Drones, sure.
Iran's another one.
Yeah, maybe. I think Democrats maybe. Well, that's true. I'd give you that. But there aren't too many of them.
Okay, George. I mean, from the outside of the Beltway, it doesn't look that different between parties, does it?
No, absolutely. There's a lot of hot air. There's a lot of daily bickering and food fights. But that somehow belies the underlying agreement. Let's look at Syria. Regime change. Both sides are committed to regime change. Libya, again, both sides were committed to that. Back in the last, starting from the 90s, expansion of NATO. Both parties agreed on that. The ballistic missile defense and eliminating any possibility of any Russian involvement in that. Both parties agreed with that. And with Israel, obviously, we talked about that. So, you know, when you think about it, it's Iran again, as we've already mentioned. Both parties are in agreement on that. I would have thought that the very fact that it's so easy to get a war going in America, really, you know, simply the president says we're just going to send the bombers in or send the Marines in, and there's pretty much no debate about it. That's a reflection of the fact that there is amazing unanimity among the parties.
What do you, Michael, how do you react to that? Because I remember during the Libya thing, and I woke up one morning and we're at war with Libya. They didn't call it a war, though.
Yeah, no, I agree with George on that, but I would just say that there's certainly a rally around the flag mentality in this country, in the sense that when the leaders say it's time to go to war, then you're going to get pretty clear, overwhelming support.
Michael,
from public,
I want you to expand upon this point, but we have to go to a short break, and after that short break, we'll continue our discussion on the imperial presidency. Stay with RT. Welcome back to Crosstalk, where all things are considered. I'm Peter Lavelle. To remind you, we're discussing Obama's imperial presidency. Okay, Michael, before we went to the break, you talked about rallying around the flag. Who is America's enemy in the world? Obama talked about that last week.
Well, I mean, it's always somewhat of an abstract thing. Basically, I think for the Obama administration, the enemy is above all else global terror, which, for the most part consists of radical Islamist terror. But, in terms of specific enemies that the United States has, who really knows? Clearly, North Korea is thought of as a quote-unquote enemy. I'm sure Iran is. I don't think the United States fears that there's any country out
but Michael, isn't that very convenient? Isn't that very convenient? To say, oh, this is the enemy today, this is the enemy next year. It's very convenient for the Pentagon and for other people, if it's so vague.
Yeah. Oh, certainly, yeah. No, that gives the government, more free rein to exploit certain things. But I think that's really true. Does anyone really think that, for example, the North Koreans are going to launch some sort of attack on the United States? It can't happen. And I mean, really, I think the main concern is non-state actors. The main enemy is non-state terrorism. I think the main threat is that there would be some sort of terrorist attack on the United States. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I don't think we live in an era where countries or where the United States is going to go to a war with a country in the United States, or that the United States will be victim of an attack coming from state actor. I can't imagine that happening.
Okay, George, I find the definition so vague that it's very helpful to the Pentagon and people that like to go to war for a lot of different reasons. George?
Yes, absolutely. The enemy changes, every few years, and then that enemy changes back again. So we had at some point that Saddam Hussein was a friend, then he became an enemy, and then we kind of forgot about him. Then he became enemy number one again. Then back in the 90s, the enemy was Serbia. Suddenly, you couldn't pick up a newspaper without vehement denunciations of the Serbian government and how America has to bomb Serbia. Then he was Iraq again, then Afghanistan. At various times, others have reared their heads. Sudan,
Iran's
North
always
Korea.
there.
That was also
Iran's
part of the
always a
axis of
given.
evil.
Iran's always a given.
Exactly. Iran is a kind of a permanent. Sometimes it disappears and then it reappears again. So there's always somebody, anybody at all, who seems to be in opposition to U.S. foreign policy, then becomes an enemy. As for the non-state actors, it's hard to think of a government that does more to enable non-state actors than the United States government. It's like the non-state actors in Libya were enabled by the United States and NATO. Now the non-state actors are being enabled by the United States and its allies in Syria. And we can be pretty sure that in 10 years' time, whoever's the president then will be waging a new war on terror against these terrible non-state actors who were enabled by Obama, just like we spent 20, 30 years fighting against Al-Qaeda, who were enabled in the 1980s.
Michael, basically America's enemy is blowback, isn't it?
Well, absolutely, yeah. You have to go back a long ways to find an example of a war or some sort of military intervention the United States was involved in where there was actually a happy ending, right? Some people would argue that Iraq sort of winded down well, but that's clearly not true. We see all the daily bombings that are happening there. Afghanistan is a disaster in the sense that we've been there for more. It's the longest war the United States has ever been involved with, and as a South Asia analyst, I really worry what's going to happen in Afghanistan in the next few years. So, yeah, blowback is definitely a concern. But I think that very concern is why Obama has not wanted to go into Syria, right? Think about what could happen. The Middle East is really a place where anytime there's any sort of intervention, there's going to be a spillover effect. If there were to be some sort of U.S. military presence or action in Syria, there would be implications for Lebanon, for Iran, for everyone. And I think that the fear of that potential blowback is one reason why the Obama government does not want to succumb to this pressure.
Well, at least not overtly. At least not overtly. Okay, at least not overtly, right? They're helping people on the ground there.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so the blowback could happen as well. George.
Right. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
All right, George, you want to jump in?
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. And as you said, it's clearly there's covert assistance taking place. Clearly the CIA, this has been reported in the media, the CIA is clearly helping these the various forces, whether it's Al-Nusra and others, in training them and arming them in Turkey, in Jordan. So there's already covert assistance. And now, the Americans are really pushing for overt assistance. They really want the Europeans to be explicit and just simply sending the arms to non-state actors. So it's getting there. It's gradually getting there. It's not going to be overnight, like, oh, well, we're just going to get involved. But the Americans have been pushing for this now for some time. Remember, Obama did press for 3 UN Security Council resolutions that would have essentially enabled America to pull a Libya in Syria. All 3 were vetoed by Russia and China. So now the Americans are pretty much getting around that UN resolution. Again, unilateralism and doing it covertly and now pretty much just overtly. Well, the hell with the fact that the UN isn't doing what we want it to do. We're just going to send them arms anyway.